The following is an AZPM original production.
For AZPM, I'm Mark McLemore, and this is Arizona Spotlight. Coming up, I'll talk with actor Craig T. Nelson, a UA alumni who will be providing the commencement speech for the graduating class of 2024. Learn about Fair Play, a new documentary that offers an in-depth look at the struggle of new mothers to find a balance between childcare, household work, and a career without neglecting their own physical and mental well-being. And find out why AZPM reporter Danielle Camara has found connections on many levels with the Brazilian martial art of capoeira. Those stories are all next on Arizona Spotlight. Craig T. Nelson has been a familiar face from movies and TV since the early 1970s. You may even know his voice from the popular Incredibles movies. You may not know, though, that he's also an alumni of the University of Arizona. He was part of what is now the UA College of Theater, Film, and Television between 1965 and 1969. Nelson found guidance and mentorship from the head of the theater department, Professor Peter Maroney. Today, the recently renovated theater that bears Maroney's name is also home to the Craig T. Nelson stage. This Friday evening, Nelson will deliver a commencement speech to the graduating class of 2024, and that gave me a chance to talk to one of my mom's favorite actors. I started by asking Craig what he remembered most about his years at the U of A.
Oh, my gosh. Probably, I think, the professors that I was engaged with while I was there, how helpful they were and how encouraging. The hands-on experience that I had with them, which I really hadn't had before that, but it was pretty much singular and one-on-one, so it was extraordinary for me. They took a very keen interest in the progression that I was trying to make, and I was married at the time and had a child, so it was a rather difficult time because I was broke, and it was difficult to go to school and to make it through without having another job, but they helped me out, and it was kind of on the side, so it was just a time I really never forgot. I look back on it, and it's quite extraordinary for me.
I've heard you in other interviews say that you attribute much of your success to the mentorship that you got from Peter Maroney. And of course, his name lives on campus with the Maroney Theater, which recently went under a huge renovation project, including the addition of the Craig T. Nelson stage. So I was wondering if you could just spend a moment recalling what working with Peter Maroney was like and what that did mean to your future career.
He took me under his wing. He made sure that I was attending classes, that I could attend classes, and that I was getting the attention that he felt that I needed. And it was a time when that was available. More than anything, just being given the opportunity to have somebody take an interest in what you were doing that they felt that you would be responsive to it. And I was. I was walking into the lobby to go to class, and he said, "Mr. Nelson, please, may I see you for a moment?" It was very formal, which I loved. And he called me into his office. He said, "Mr. Nelson, I have something I wish to talk to you about. Your elocution, sir, is terrible." And I went, "Huh? Your elocution? I rarely can understand you when you're speaking on the stage." "You're kidding me, really?" "Yes, what is the problem? I think we're going to have to give you some elocution lessons." And I said, "Well, Mr. Maroney, I have a prosthetic in my mouth. It's a dental apparatus that I have there because I'm missing 2 front teeth." And he said, "You do?" And I said, "Yeah." And so I took it out. And I showed it to him. And he said, "My God, we've got to get this fixed." And he sent me to his dentist. I was able to get something that was a little less obtrusive in my mouth. And he assured me later that changed my whole tenure there in terms of him being able to understand me. But it was such a wonderful gift. A simple little thing. I couldn't afford dental work. I mean, just out of the question. I couldn't afford gas.
What kind of ambitions did you have for your performing career at that time?
Oh, gosh, I wasn't sure, Mark. It was whatever comes. I think more than anything, I had survival on my mind with a family, and I was taken care of by classmates, Liz Murphy Burns, who I think is going to be there on Friday. She would oftentimes buy me breakfast, maybe, celebrity and stardom. However that manifested itself at the time, I didn't understand that at all, what that meant. I think that to some degree I was kept out of the loop.
Craig, have you ever been asked to give a commencement speech before?
No.
So you don't have to spoil the speech, of course, but what kind of things did you meditate on? What kind of things came to mind in terms of the speech you'll be delivering this weekend?
Mark?
Yes?
You have just put the hammer on the nail, as they say.
How so?
When President Robinson asked me to do this, I have been consumed with what I would deliver, what I had to say. What could I impart that had any kind of relevance to a graduating class of this size and the experience that they've been through? What can I bring to it? And I've probably written maybe 50 different versions of what I had in mind.
Yeah.
And I can tell you this, that what I hope will be imparted is a sense of hope and a derivation, if you will, of a desire, a significant desire in each of us to fulfill a dream or to make a difference and to affect change. And I can only express that from my own experience. The only other thing that I have on top of that is basically the theme of it is do for one what you would do for many. Because in my life, I have been nurtured and sustained and sponsored and mentored by so many different people. I have only an attitude of gratitude.
So a lot of the young people that you'll be talking to at the commencement are going to hear your voice, and it's going to remind them very heavily of a beloved character, Mr. Incredible. And I count myself as a big fan. I think I was influenced by a lot of the same things that Brad Bird was influenced by growing up. And so I took to The Incredibles like a fish to water. How would you compare that role to other things in your long career? What are your feelings about portraying that character again if the chance ever comes up?
Well, it was an opportunity that was really serendipitous to do the first one. My wife and I were in Hawaii, and we had watched Iron Giant for, I think, the fourth or fifth time.
Yeah, that's a great one.
I remember commenting to Doria, my wife, and saying, gee, I'd really like to do a voiceover. I haven't done one of those, and I'm going to have to look into that. 2 weeks later, and I'm not kidding, I got the script for Incredible.
That's incredible.
It is. I mean, honestly, that's what happened. And I wasn't sure it was an animated film at first. I got it and naturally said yes. And then, it was a pretty big hit. And after all those years, I don't know what it was, 12 or 13, something like that. I'm not even sure. The second one came up, and it was just a completely different experience for me.
And a new audience, I would imagine.
Yeah, my grandkids, my great-grandkids, they're all familiar with it. They love it. Like I said, it's such a gift.
Craig T. Nelson will give the commencement speech for the University of Arizona graduating class of 2024 on Friday, May 10th at 7:30 at the Arizona Stadium. Next, a look at a new documentary about the unique combination of responsibilities and emotional and physical stress that comes with being a new mother. AZPM's Alicia Vasquez discusses these issues with two U of A physicians.
In Tucson, the documentary Fair Play will be shown at the screening room on May 19th. The screening is free, and there will also be a chance for the audience to talk with my next guest. Dr. Catherine Emmerich and Dr. Saira Kalia are both associate professors of psychiatry in the University of Arizona College of Medicine. They also co-direct an important resource that is available to new moms and their families. Dr. Emmerich begins.
Yeah, so Dr. Kalia and I both run APAL, which is Arizona Perinatal Psychiatry Access Line. So we're really focused on perinatal mood and anxiety disorders and substance use disorders. One of the things that really spoke to us about the documentary Fair Play is that it's really looking at all of the societal expectations and identity shifts that occur with motherhood and how that environment really sets people up to be more vulnerable to anxiety and depression as they transition into motherhood. It talks about, what it's like to not have your work be visible or be valued, to feel like you have all these competing expectations that you just can't meet, to feel like you have no agency to fix this with your partner or to change a trajectory of your family.
And Dr. Kalia, how would you like to respond?
Maternal mental health is a critical issue. It affects millions of women across the United States. And we've had growing awareness and advocacy efforts, but despite that, the rates of maternal mental health disorders remain alarmingly high. And behind these statistics of really, awful numbers, including morbidity as well as mortality numbers, there's a deep-rooted societal expectation and a lack of supportive social policies that increase the challenges faced by new moms. We know that we are talking most of the time in our professional lives about disease, but also there is a lot of distress. And the societal norms place unrealistic expectations on moms, perpetuating this idea of the perfect parent, right? You're inundated with images and messages that portray motherhood as this blissful experience with endless joy and fulfillment. And the reality is far more complex. And I really appreciated that reality-based approach to this. Women work both inside the home, professionally and domestically. How is that sort of divided, and how can you consider that on an individual level? But I really also like the idea that it takes it beyond blaming the individual woman for it and saying, what are the other considerations as well? And I think I like that idea that we can create that conversation and that realization. And there's a few social considerations when it comes to the distress and the challenges faced by moms in the U.S.
What would you say are some important conversations that parents should have before their child arrives to kind of ease that transition?
So this is something that we talk about planning for the postpartum period quite a bit because it's very important to have as much of a plan in place as you can before you're suddenly sleep deprived and before you're suddenly recovering from this huge bodily trauma. Some of the things that we recommend people talking about with their partners and families is how to plan for sleeping. So who's going to be responsible for the baby when, to make sure that a new mom can have enough time to sleep and recover. What I hear a lot of is, my partner is working outside of the house and I'm not, so I can't ask them to do anything. And challenging that is one of the first conversations I will have with a mom often, that idea that I'm not working. When really what's happening is that you are solely responsible for the life of this helpless baby that can't do anything for themselves. So actually what you're doing is working 24/7, and your partner is working maybe 9 to 5. So you are allowed to get some support, and you deserve to have some support.
I think there's also a few things, right? Parenting styles that people haven't ever discussed before, right? What are your respective parenting philosophies, discipline strategies? How do you envision it? That's a good conversation to have. And that division of labor, right? How will you share household chores, other responsibilities? I think the film also does such a good job of kind of highlighting that in terms of you replace a roll of toilet paper, for example. That's an example in the film. But that was the last one. And, you also have to think about the whole piece of who brings in everything, that management load, that invisible load, that second shift. And is there a way that that can be divided as well? And I think if you are coming into it with a history of mental illness, either for the birthing person or their partner, it's important to have a discussion around that too. How is this going to impact my mental health? What are we going to do to make sure that we are, addressing it in a timely manner rather than letting it get out of hand and then having a more serious issue to kind of deal with?
One of the things that also really was interesting that it touched on was how the gender roles also affect the fathers. the fact that a child has that extra piece of the puzzle in their upbringing. One couple mentioned like the whole concept of a village.
Right.
You need the other half of that village to be there. So it's really interesting.
And because for a lot of people, those two parents are the only village that exists for them as we live in these more and more dispersed communities.
Yeah, and I also like that the documentary pointed that out kind of gently, right? Like the mom's working and the dad's working. When you look at how they broke down the amount of women that are breadwinners and kind of breaking it down by race, that was also eye-opening for me, because I think when we approach men's work, even in the workplace, not even just at home, we approach it slightly differently, right? Like you have to be available. There's a gendered difference in the expectation of like, oh, well, he's working kind of a deal. And I think that challenge that is placed on it, saying, well, you're both working, was really nice for me to see as well, because in our work, I don't find that men are like, oh, I don't want to be involved. Like, I bring in the bacon kind of a deal. That's never been really my experience. People want to be involved. They want to be engaged. And a lot of it is, I don't know how, help me help myself, a kind of a scenario. So I think that calling in, showing that this is possible, these are the ways it is possible for you to be part of your household as well, because that's a huge shift, right? We are looking at more and more families that are both people are earning, and things do have to shift.
Thank you for transitioning into that, because that's another thing I wanted to touch on. When you have two working parents, what would you say are the biggest ways our system fails us in enabling both parents to be able to find that work-life balance so they can both be equally present with the child and also accommodate their career responsibilities?
Well, I think one of the couples that participate in the documentary really talked about this pretty eloquently. For example, who is it that is responsible for kids when they're sick? And you guys are both working. Who's responsible for doctor's appointments? And the mom who was talking, she had set herself up in a job where she had more flexibility. So she was always responsible, versus the way she phrased it for her husband was that it would be a debit. He would have to ask permission to go. And we find that pretty frequently that women end up in positions where there's some more flexibility and their partners don't have that. And so they end up responsible for all the unexpected things that come up. And that ends up hampering their careers. Really, when we're talking about, enabling two working parents to have a work-life balance, really we're talking mostly about system-wide changes. So having protections for paternity leave, having real maternity leave for moms, having real access to places to pump. That's mentioned several times in the documentary as a big hurdle that women face. Having the expectation in the workplace that dads are going to need to leave early to pick up their kids. Dads are going to need to take their kids to doctor's appointments, versus seeing that as normal for moms and really unusual for dads.
We're advocating for policies and initiatives that are promoting gender equality within the household, within the workplace, and within society at large. So challenging those traditional gender roles and stereotypes on every single level is kind of really key. And that's flexible work policies in which you can have flexible hours for both fathers and mothers, telecommuting options, extended parental leave, promotion of that parental leave idea, childcare options that are affordable so that people aren't stuck into positions that they're like, well, I've got to be in this, scenario. So I think how our society is set up promotes these ideals, and those kind of ideas of breaking them down on a societal level, on a household level, can be really valuable in that, so that we can have this culture shift. That plays into everything, right? Including media representation. Or there's a mom's group that I'm part of. There was a post on it recently that's like, my husband is the stay-at-home father. His number is on everything, but they still call me from school. It's going to take a minute in terms of like changing the culture and how we perceive fathers' roles and mothers' roles in our society. So I think that's going to take a few years of change, but that's part of why we're hoping that we can start these conversations.
I'm so glad you brought up that point about sort of the time it's going to take to shift the culture, because that's something else that we saw in the documentary around modeling for the next generation. We also heard that initially in the interviews with the couples where the men are like, I don't know how to do that. She knows how to do that, so she does it. And a lot of that happens in childhood where women, we don't call it, training for being a homemaker, but that's still happening, where women are the ones whose moms cook with them, who know, how to find stuff in the grocery store, who know how to do caretaking of little kids because they were babysitters. And often men just didn't have any of those experiences. And so it's true that they truly do not know how to do these things that women have been exposed to for their entire lives. And so changing your relationship now, if you have kids, is going to start that shift for the next generation, because these boys will grow up being exposed to the same things, how to do things that are inside the house.
For new moms or expecting moms who may need support, what resources can you recommend?
The main things that I would recommend are, as we talked about earlier, coming up with a plan. At our website, apal.arizona.edu, you can find templates for you and your partner and family to fill out, so you don't have to come up with ideas for the plan. The other thing is to know that feeling really, really sad or feeling really, really anxious is not just a normal transition into motherhood. And if you are experiencing that, tell whatever provider you see, because any provider can call us, perinatal psychiatrists, and get guidance on how to treat their patient. And so if you tell any provider, they can get in touch with us so you can get treatment. These mental illnesses are treatable. They're super common and they're treatable. We have effective medications. And so I just encourage people to speak up and talk to their providers if they're experiencing that.
For new moms, realizing that it might be so overwhelming, you may not know that you're overwhelmed. So kind of making sure that you're connecting with your support group and your support network before you give birth and, of course, after you give birth. We have a bunch of resources on our website, so that can be helpful. I'm biased when it comes to, getting breastfeeding support, getting doulas. I think having somebody else really does help you center yourself, or they can kind of be your mirror if you need them. There's a bunch of support groups across Arizona, online support groups from Postpartum Support International. And if you are a friend who's listening in today and your friend just gave birth or your family member did, ask them these questions, say, how are you doing? And help them connect. Because sometimes when you are that overwhelmed, it really is hard to make that phone call. Check in on your friends and family members and see if you can help them figure that out. And if you are struggling yourself, check out our website and see if we can help you there. Sometimes your health plan will also be helpful. So Access has multiple options. Other health plans will have options in terms of childbirth services, postpartum care, breastfeeding support.
But I would also add just really quickly that if you're checking in, to keep checking in, because the highest risk time postpartum for suicide is actually 6 to 9 months postpartum. If you're checking in, keep checking in for that whole first year postpartum.
Thank you so much to both of you.
AZPM's Alicia Vasquez spoke with Dr. Catherine Emmerich and Dr. Saira Kalia, who are both associate professors of psychiatry in the University of Arizona College of Medicine. They are the co-directors of APAL, that stands for the Arizona Perinatal Psychiatric Access Line. The documentary Fair Play is screening on Sunday, May 19th. It begins at 1 p.m. at the Screening Room in downtown Tucson, and Drs. Emmerich and Kalia will be taking questions from the audience after the film. The screening is free, but you must register online. There's a link on the Arizona Spotlight page at azpm.org. Next, we'll find out about the capoeira scene in Tucson, as told by a new enthusiast of its athleticism, grace, and the sense of community. AZPM reporter Danielle Camara.
Capoeira is all about a struggle and finding the strength and the flexibility to find solutions. And so that applies to every aspect of life.
That's Ann Pollock, or as I call her, Mestra Luar. My teenage son and I have been training at her academy, Capoeira Mandinga Tucson, for 2.5 years now. Capoeira is a Brazilian martial art, and music is a big part of it. It has its own songs and instruments. The lead instrument in the roda is the berimbau, a single-stringed bow attached to a gourd and played with a stick, a stone to create different tones, and a shaker.
Hey guys, everyone ready for a nice roda? You guys all look a little asleep.
Roda means circle. The roda is where you bring the game of capoeira. And capoeira is a fight, and it's a dance, and it's also a game, like a sport right? And these days, a lot of people need to think of it that way, as it's definitely a martial art. People ask me, is it a martial art or a dance? I say, you need to think of this as a martial art, because otherwise you'll get kicked, right? I moved in to San Francisco in 1986, and I happened to move into an apartment where one of the first women in the United States did capoeira. And then my friend, who had also moved into this apartment, started doing capoeira, and so the two of them were like, you gotta start, you'll love this.
She was in her 20s and started training with the third capoeira maestre in the U.S., Maestre Marcelo, who gamers may know as Eddie Gordo from Tekken.
A Brazilian superstar fighting capoeira, Eddie Gordo! Fight!
Marcelo was filmed for the moves of the capoeirista characters in the game. Anne did fall in love with capoeira, and not long after, she went on her first capoeira trip to Brazil. Anne moved to Tucson in the mid-90s with 10 years experience under her belt, and she started teaching at the University of Arizona Rec Center.
Capoeira was starting to grow in its popularity, but if you talk to people in the general Tucson community, they'd be like, "Capo what?" And so it was not very well known.
And then Only the Strong came out.
That really was the first movie to open American eyes to what capoeira was. And even today, you'll find people like, "Oh, do you know the movie Only the Strong?" And it's like, yes, I know the movie Only the Strong, and I know Mestre Almain. People come to capoeira for different reasons. Some people come to it for the music. Some come because they want a good workout. But I think what keeps people in capoeira is the whole culture of it. And so that's learning a culture different from your own, in this case an Afro-Brazilian culture, a unique capoeira culture. But especially in the last, 25 years, it's become bringing the world together.
Capoeira was created hundreds of years ago by enslaved people who were kidnapped from Africa and brought to Brazil to work on sugarcane farms. So if you've ever seen capoeira and you're not sure if it's a dance, that's because they created it to hide the fact that they were training to fight.
My name is Thiago Ribeiro de Souza. They came up with capoeira because it looks like a dance. It looks like you're dancing. And the idea is you're trying to fool the people looking at what's happening, right? There's a lot of trickery in capoeira, and the idea is you're first and foremost, you're fooling whoever is looking at it, because there's the music and the singing. The singing has the history of capoeira, so it's one way that they learn how to bring back the culture, right?
Thiago started capoeira as a kid, growing up in the state of Goiás in Brazil.
Yeah, when I was a kid, it was very common for people to do two things. One is soccer, and the other one is capoeira.
At some point during college, he stopped training and life went on. About 7 years ago, he moved to Tucson with his wife and their young son.
And we were here for maybe 4 years, and a friend of my kid from school came to capoeira. And one day we were talking with their parents, and they said, "Oh yeah, my kids are doing capoeira. It's a Brazilian art, a martial art." And I was like, "What? There's a capoeira group in Tucson? We have to go there."
Living in the U.S., Thiago wanted his son to have that contact with the Brazilian culture.
Capoeira is such an important part of the Brazilian culture. There's so much of the Brazilian culture in capoeira. The malandragem, the trickery of capoeira, it's very ingrained in Brazil, in everyone, not only in people that play capoeira. So we have this thing about, the trickery and the playfulness, the music. It's very ingrained in our capoeira, in Brazilian culture, and I hope he retains that and keeps it for his life.
Well, the hodas with other people from other groups and going to other hodas are like the funnest part of capoeira.
My son Rio turned 18 last summer. We don't do all that much together these days. He's kind of like my roommate now, except one who I remind to feed the cats and go to bed at a decent hour. So for me, my favorite part of capoeira is being with him. Do you like doing it with Hadrian, with your friend?
I think we have good games. I think we have interesting contrast for our styles of play. He plays fast, is able to connect his moves and keep going fast. And I do a lot of ground moves.
And what do you think about when you go in the hoda with me?
I think that we're both kind of improving at similar rates. And I think it's fun to see how you're going to react to a move I do and the other way, and how I'm going to react to your moves.
I think it's really fun that we do it together. It's makes me really happy.
Yeah.
And so the roda is what brings it all together and gives you the community and gives you the understanding of how the techniques can be applied when you're actually using them against another person or with another person. Because in addition to being a fight against someone, it's also a conversation. And so that's your chance to have that dialogue.
That story was by Danielle Camara. You can hear a longer version online at azpm.org. Thank you for listening to Arizona Spotlight. This show is a production of AZPM. The production engineer is Jim Blackwood. Production assistance by Alicia Vasquez. I'm producer and host Mark McLemore.
AZPM podcasts are made possible in part by donations from listeners like you. Learn more at support.azpm.org. Thank you.